Good morning and welcome to the Schools and Nursery Show. We're delighted to be here live this year, and it's great to have schools and leaders and our community back together on this occasion. This is the first of a series of panel discussions that will take place over the next 2 days, and I'm delighted this morning to welcome to our panel the following guests. Starting from this side of the room, we have the headmaster from Brighton College, Dubai, Mr. Simon Crane. Beside Simon, we have Ms. Yannicka Arnis, who's the director of Universal American School, and just to my left, my friend and colleague, Mr. James Monaghan from North London Collegiate School. This morning, we'll be looking at the topic of understanding the different curriculum choices in the UAE. And I'm delighted that all three colleagues, of course, represent variations of different types of the curriculum. Simon, we're looking at English National Curriculum, GCSEs and A-level. Yannicka, a blend and mixture of the American curriculum standards, but also the IB, and James at North London, the IB curriculum. I'm just wondering, parents, it's a big choice for parents. You're leading 3 incredible schools here in the city. How does a parent make that choice when they first arrive? James, maybe start with you. Any initial thoughts? Because it's a minefield, isn't it?
Yeah, I think from our point of view with the IB, and the reason we're an IB curriculum school is the flexibility within the framework that you have. So it allows you to design a curriculum that fits with your own ethos. And as a school with a strong British flavour and obviously a background in the UK, we do have that in our school, but it's great to be able to incorporate that structure, which you often get with a British curriculum, into that IB framework, and then, if you like, sprinkle over the top the great things about the IB curriculum, the conceptual approach, the thematic approach, the global context. So that's why I find it quite exciting to be an IB school, because you have that flexibility to kind of create a structure within the framework.
It's great, Yannicka, that you're actually sitting in the middle of the two, because you have a completely different blend and mix in your school. Maybe explain to parents the opportunities that will be available within your type of curriculum models, and again, how that suits parents.
Yeah, thank you, Fiona. I think one thing which is a massive strength of being a school leader in Dubai and being a parent in the Dubai context is actually the choice that we provide in this emirate. Knowing that people come from all over the world, it's really important that we have all these different curricular choices. And at Universal American School, as you say, we are an American curriculum school. We're also an IB school. So we use the IB frameworks, much similar to what my colleague says here about the benefits of the approaches to teaching and learning in the IB that really hones in not just on the academic rigor, but also on the skills development. And we are also in a place in the world where we understand the importance of the development of 21st century skills and preparing our students for life outside of school and after school. So as an IB school, naturally that comes through the conceptual understandings, it comes through the inquiry-based learning. But at Universal American School, we're also, as you say, we are an American curriculum school also. So following the AERO standards, which are the American Common Core standards for international schools, allows our parents to have choice also within the school, not just among the schools in Dubai, but also within our own school at Universal American School. So I think that's also a benefit when being a parent and making the decisions about what school to choose.
Can I just tease that just a little bit further with you, because I can see how some parents might be confused. Is it an American curriculum? Is it IB? What exactly is it? Just can you unpick that a little bit to explain how your strands work?
I'm really happy that you mentioned that, because we have to understand that IB isn't a curriculum. IB is a framework for delivery. So it allows us to teach in a certain way, allows us to understand that we do not follow a prescribed curriculum, but we teach in context, and we teach also in, as was mentioned, in global context. So even though we follow American curriculum standards, the way that our students learn in the IB context is really to see the connections across disciplines. Math, science, English, languages, they're not standalone. They're inquiry-based, intertwined into a conceptual understanding. So it broadens the ability that we have as a school to allow students to to understand how what they learn is purposeful and can connect to something that they can relate to outside of school, for example.
It's interesting, Simon, of course, because you and I both lead traditional national curriculum for England schools, schools with GCSE and A-level. And there's a part of us, I'm sure, that would concur with many of the great education philosophies that colleagues have shared this morning. But maybe, again, explain that to parents, your views and why the English national curriculum could be a good choice for parents.
Yeah, thanks, Fiona. I think it's important for parents to consider, not necessarily consider what is the best curriculum, but what's the best curriculum for their child. Because I think all curriculums have lots of merits, and I think it's really important parents do their homework. As you said, Fiona, we offer the British curriculum, but with international elements. So, for example, in our prep school at Brighton College, we offer the IPC, the International Primary Curriculum, to present that global context, and then GCSEs followed by A-levels. And we all know the sort of history and tradition of a British education. And I think the other factor for parents to really consider carefully of all curriculums is the portability and how that can move around the globe as jobs change and locations change.
Let's talk portability, because I think, what we've been through over the last 12 months certainly has changed many mindsets in terms of what the future looks like for our young people. Portability of the IB curriculum, James?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the reasons we chose the IB school, and being a school with a strong British background, there was that choice initially. But I think one of the reasons is that portability in terms of universities around the world understanding what the IB curriculum is. And while all curriculums, offer an avenue and a pathway for students to access university globally, I think the IB is, certainly the oldest, longest running curriculum that hasn't gone through perhaps as many changes as a lot of the other curriculums, and universities understand what they're getting. So I think that's one aspect of the IB, which is a strength in terms of that global context.
And certainly for international parents, it's not sort of a country-linked curriculum, is it? It has that transparency that spreads across the globe. The same with the American curriculum. I mean, it's a stronghold, but again, there's lots of different types of Common Core, aren't there? Different types of American curriculum as such. There isn't a curriculum as stands, is there?
Absolutely, that's correct. Of course, since it's not a federal system, so it's a state-based system in the US. AERO, which are the standards that we follow at UAS, are the American International Curriculum Standards. So it's kind of taken the best of all the standards for learning. So really focusing on what is it that we're expecting students to have achieved at the end of an academic year, for example, in maths, in science, in literacy. And it's a stepping stone, building year by year the depth of their understanding and their knowledge. I think similar to what was said about the IB as a framework and the fact that it is a global lens, we also have to remember that IB is created for portability. So having the IB framework allows any school here in the UAE, irrespective of the British tradition, American tradition, also to really set the students up for that, or their families up for the possibility of moving out of this emirate, out to somewhere else in the world, and really fit in another school quite seamlessly. And more than 50 years ago, when the IB was founded, this was the ethos of the IB, to create a school system that would allow international families to find something that was similar to what their children had been in one place, in another place, completely different part of the world.
I suppose we would argue, wouldn't we, the portability of the English national curriculum and the GCSE and A-level system, that gold standard has been around for a long time, and our schools are full of young people from across the world. What would your message to parents be, if they were anxious and they were worried about that movement between curriculum models?
Fiona, the A-levels have often been referred to as the gold standard for entry into university, and the British system is renowned for its rigorous external assessment and that benchmarking and rigor that goes into those assessments, those qualifications that prepare pupils for universities anywhere in the world, and it is very much possible to use A-levels along with other flavours of the British curriculum in the sixth form, such as the co-curricular activities, work experience, leadership modules. At the college, we're deploying a special curriculum next year on mental health to move pupils on from the pandemic. So absolutely, there is entry into universities with A-levels anywhere in the world, and I think it's becoming more normal now for pupils to go from the British system at sixth form into the US, for example, or Europe or Australia.
I mean, we're talking about the outcomes, aren't we? We're talking about the end result almost, but many of the parents who perhaps are with us today are making initial choices for their 3.5-year-old, that 4-year-old. Where do I begin? What happens if, just in your view, what happens if I choose an English National Curriculum school, for example, to start with, or a CBSE school, or a completely different curriculum? Can I make the transition into yours? And when does it all become, oh, you shouldn't move?
I think as well, obviously there's a wide choice of curriculums, but for me, it's also about choosing the school itself, because you could choose an IB school, in one part of Dubai, and it would be a very different experience to perhaps the IB experience you have with us. So I think it's so important that parents buy into the ethos of the school, alongside the curriculum. And the IB is a challenge. I mean, I have 3 children. 2 of them did A-levels, and 1 of them did the IB. Okay. And I have a personal view on kind of what they got from that. But I think ultimately it comes down to the school. The ethos of the school, and do you as a parent buy into that ethos? What is it that you want as a parent for your child? Do you want an all-round holistic education where everything is treated equally, or do you want a really academically ambitious education which is really focusing on one particular thing? So I think that choice at 3.5 is a big one, but I think also parents should understand that it's very much about the school and choosing the right school. And obviously parents in Dubai may not be here for 15 years, as they go from 3 to 18. And that transferability is also important as well.
So devil's advocate, I suppose, Yannicka, does the curriculum matter at all then, really? Because, I mean, I concur with everything Jamie's just said. It is about the school and the ethos and how you choose a school. Does the curriculum matter?
It's a really good question, and one can wonder if the curriculum actually matters. Curriculum definitely matters in the long run, but when you are talking about a 3.5-year-old, we could definitely say it's questionable whether the choice should be based on the curriculum. And I agree that it needs to be a fit for the family. There are multiple factors that parents should consider when choosing a school, and I wouldn't be too worried about the curriculum at the age of 3.5, for all the reasons that have been mentioned, and in addition also to the fact that even if they are to stay even if a family would stay here for 15 years, for example, making a choice at the age of 3.5 isn't the ultimate choice. It is not the only time in a child's career in education that parents can make the choice. So I think looking for a good fit for the child, thinking about home logistics. Where does it make sense that my child goes? Shall I travel for 45 minutes, or shall I choose a school which is 20 minutes away? What can alleviate stress on the family? Do I have friends somewhere? Where will my child be happy? And now, of course, we're limited in exposing our schools to our parent community. So I recognize that parents today are faced, because of the pandemic, faced with a challenge which is somewhat different than a non-pandemic year, where they could come in, they could walk the corridors of the school much easier, they could kind of get the sense of the atmosphere in the school. But all the schools in Dubai do a lot of outreach for parents to facilitate the choice, to help them get that flair, even if we're somewhat limited in the accessibility of our schools right now due to COVID.
So I know we're slightly off track, but that's an interesting question. So Simon, from your point of view, a family who can't come and visit the school, we're here having these discussions, the recordings will be used and made available. And if people haven't been able to attend the school and nursery show today to ask those questions, what are the questions that you would encourage parents when they make contact with the school? What are the types of questions that will help them inform the right decisions for them?
I think first and foremost, if you can, please go and visit schools. I understand that's challenging at the moment, but I think it's a very different experience when you can feel the education that your child potentially is going to get in any setting. Obviously, that's not possible for everybody, and the technology has helped enormously and we're all used to Microsoft Teams and Zoom and so on. So those interactions, those questions are really important, and I would encourage parents to really approach it with the mindset that no question is a silly question, actually. And it's really important, I think, to talk to school leaders about their vision for the school, their track record, their parent involvement, their parent satisfaction, and the progress of pupils at the school at all ages. I think that would be the core message, and that would then obviously pick other avenues to go down and discuss. And I think it's also important to go beyond just school leaders, and if there's an opportunity to have a conversation with a teacher, I think that's very helpful. It's a different perspective, and you can get a much more clearer picture of how education would operate in that particular establishment.
One of the things certainly that we've seen as a school at Heartland over the last few months is the number of new people coming into the city, coming from overseas. And it's very challenging sometimes for parents who are coming from a curriculum system that isn't represented today, a curriculum system that doesn't have any comparability to any that we represent. Again, key pieces of advice, perhaps, James, for parents coming, for example, from something that's extraordinarily difficult and different. How do they make these decisions?
Yeah, and I think we're, as school leaders, we are going to champion our own curriculums and our own schools. And I think, as Simon says, one of the things that we encourage or try and facilitate for parents is actually talking to other parents. Existing parents in the school, as obviously it's marketing to a degree, but I think I will sit on a school in action for half an hour and talk to parents and tell them that everything's fantastic, and we're an amazing school and we do all this and that, and obviously I believe that, but I think it's really important for parents to perhaps have those opportunities to talk to existing parents in the school. I think it's a really useful way. I often try and put parents in touch with parents, who have children of a similar age, for example, or are going through a similar experience or have been through a similar experience. So they've come from India and an Indian curriculum school, for example. What did that mean? What did that look like? How did we support them? So, I think that's something to perhaps, say to parents to try and, ask. I think parents sometimes don't want to ask those questions. They kind of, get nervous about that, but I would encourage parents to try and get that opportunity.
So, great piece of advice, number one, to those who are listening today, ask the school to put you in connection, if they possibly can, with parents who are coming from where you are, so you can have those frank conversations, perhaps in your native tongue as well. So it demystifies elements of the curriculum. Great piece of advice. Thank you for that, James. Yannicka, your takeaway or giveaway to parents today?
Yeah. Somewhat similar, and we're fortunate at UAS to have a lot of speakers of different languages among our staff. So language can often be a barrier, as you say, for incoming families. Say they might be coming from Russia, from Japan, from Korea, and to be able to speak with somebody in your native tongue about something so important as your child can also be helpful. So for the parents to be aware of the fact that a lot of the schools here in Dubai have that opportunity to connect either with the parent body or with somebody in the school who might speak the language. And I would definitely advise parents to think about that as one of the questions. I think another thing I'd like to tell parents that I think we shouldn't miss is actually to tell us about their child. So in making their choice, we will talk a lot about what we do in our schools, but that might not be what they're looking for, but we will be able to tailor the conversation to the needs of the family if we know what the needs are, or we know what the child is like. Is it a child who is outgoing? Is it a child who loves sports? Is it a child who's introvert, who is not exposed a lot to social environments? All of the things that can help us meet the answers that the parents need will come also through parents' ability to actually share something unique about their own child with us. And I think that's something that I would hope that parents feel very comfortable doing.
Yeah. Simon, I'm so conscious that because you're last in the queue every time, that so much of what's been said is so much that we would agree with. But I'm hoping it's given you some thinking time to give us maybe your final takeaway in terms of advice to parents.
Yeah, I echo everyone's comments, first of all. And at the college, we, as Yannicka said, encourage play visits or interviews and discussions, even opportunity to join pupil council meetings as prospective parents and pupils, just to get a flavour of what it's like at the school. But I think the connecting with families is a really good one. Talking to teachers is the second one. But ultimately, if you can, I think it's really worth the investment walking into a school. That would be my takeaway to parents, if you can facilitate that.
Okay. I'm conscious that this is our first session of the day, and we were hopeful that we might have some questions that have come in through the chat rooms. And I think somebody might have sent me a question. Let me just see. The technology doesn't always work as it hasn't done, but I haven't got the question. I've got nothing at the moment. I've got one here, I think. Question. I have a 4-year-old. I think we've answered this question, actually. Does it really matter what curriculum? And I think we've all concurred that the school is actually more important rather than the curriculum itself. And unless there's anything anybody can add to that, I think you've ably answered that question. But a question from Anne. We don't know whether we will move to next. It might be the UK or it might be abroad. Is it best to stick with the UK curriculum? Simon, I'll start with you this time. I'll give you the...
Yeah, so of course I'm going to say absolutely yes, because I think with any choice in life, it's good to go over your own interpretation of what that curriculum is and your own experience. And if you have roots in the United Kingdom and have exposure to the British curriculum before, then that's a sensible starting point in my view, and I would advise to continue that pathway. Yeah,
and I think I would add to that it's not as difficult now to find an IB school post 16 in the UK, certainly, but it does depend what part of the country you move to, whereas it will always be the norm to be able to find a British curriculum school no matter where you move in the country. So it will certainly make the transition easier for families and will make that reintegration a lot easier for them to manage as well. And then finally, a question that says, my daughter wants to go to, or hopes to go to university in the US. Should she therefore go to a US curriculum school? And I think we're all going to say no, but I'm going to start with Yannicka and give her the US platform to begin with at least, and then maybe colleagues can interject.
Thank you, Fiona. So of course, I'll take the opportunity to say yes, of course, she should choose an American school. And I would say that it wouldn't, and I would kind of challenge that if a child was 4 years old, it wouldn't matter. No. If a child, and it wouldn't matter then with the other question either, if you're here and you don't know where you're going, if you're going to the UK at 4 years, it doesn't matter that much. If a child is older, it can matter. But I think ultimately, even if I say I will be a strong advocate for an American curriculum school being a great platform for anyone who wants to study in the US, but also being an IB school is a brilliant platform for anyone who wants to study in the US or anywhere else in the world. And also being an American curriculum school doesn't have to be that you are going to study in the US. You might be very successful here in the UAE. You might go to Australia, might go to Germany. You'll be very successful if you do your best in your education, if the choice is right for you, irrespective of the curriculum. So I have to give a plug for all curriculums as well. It's
probably fair to say, though, that the more prestigious the university, perhaps in the US, the more familiar they will be with different curricula in the world. Maybe in some of the smaller colleges and some of the smaller states, an American curriculum might be a more natural path. Where does the IB fit into that, Jeremy?
Again, I would go back for parents. The advice I would give is to the school. And does the school have a track record of getting students into top universities in the US? And it's about choosing a school that can talk confidently and show evidence of getting students into those universities, but really understanding what it means to get those places, because getting access to top universities in the UK and the US, actually what they're looking for is quite different in many respects, because the US place an equal, if you like, emphasis on their profile outside of academic achievement. And it's so important that schools understand that, so that when they begin their journey, whenever it is, the school is building that profile and understands that when they apply to universities, what they've been doing beyond the classroom is taking as read, they've got to get good results, obviously. Whereas the UK, actually, although top universities will, of course, look at music, drama and sport and all sorts of other things, it is slightly different. So the advice I would give parents is just to, again, make sure the school really understands the process and really has that track record of understanding what it looks like to get students into an Ivy League college or to Oxford or Cambridge or whatever.
Simon, anything to add in terms of that movement from a British curriculum system to the US? Do you think it's more difficult?
I think it's, quite often it's a misconception that it's more difficult from the British system to the American system. My wife's American, so we have, very personal experience of both education systems. So I think it's just important for parents to understand that whatever curriculum they choose, there is portability between all countries. It doesn't necessarily set your pathway to one home country based on that curriculum.
And I think, Yannick, it was you who said earlier, the privilege that we all have of living in this part of the world means that even if I'm in a particular curriculum model, my access to SAT prep and some of the other entry requirements for different universities around the world are freely available. And such is the joy of being able to live here, really. Any final comments to offer to our parents who are sitting at home, I hope in the comfort of their homes, watching you first thing this morning? Final words of wisdom. Please don't feel pressurized into doing so. I think you've offered so many great ideas already. And so many
choose a school for me. Choose a school.
Not the curriculum.
That will be first and foremost. And
I think my final words really is absolutely do your research, but then have a research window and stick to it as parents and make a decision, because I think ultimately sometimes you can spend too much thinking time. And I completely understand that it's a very important decision, but I would encourage parents to put some parameters around the process themselves.
Okay.
Final word from me would be to look for a school where a child can flourish, where a child can have voice, choice, develop holistically. I think it's really important that a child gets the ability to really blossom in a school and to explore both the academia, but also everything else in life, and building kind of a strong sense of self, as well as building that kind of character development that will help that child be successful in life when they graduate from a school here and when they go on to college and universities around the world. And I really do agree that it is really the overall picture of what a young individual can bring to life beyond the K to 12 or pre-K to 12 that will matter.
Okay. I'm incredibly grateful this morning for having listened to the insight that our colleagues have shared with us. Incredibly grateful to Simon, to Yannicka and to James. And I hope that our panel discussion this morning has actually genuinely reassured parents that there isn't much difference between us. We all agree that you choose the school, perhaps first. The curriculum is almost secondary to that choice. It's what fits for your child, your family, in your context. Thank you for your questions. To those who are watching from home, my name is Fiona Cottam, and it's been our privilege and pleasure to be with you for the first session this morning, live from the Schools and Nursery Show here in Dubai.